Welcome to The Right Question. I'm Daphne Gray Grant. Today I'm talking about how to write a family history. Here's a question from Beth Johnson, who's based in Marietta, Georgia. Here's what she asked. Our grandchildren have asked my husband and me to send them chapters so they can gather pictures for a memoir. I'm inclined to try to help them after seeing what a magnificent job they did with their other grandparents' information. Now, here's the catch. We have so much to tell. How can we decide on the really important stuff? Our lives stem from two cultures, Canada and the USA, and before that there were four, going all the way back into the expulsion of landowner Jews from Russia. I know it's best to start with mind mapping, but even that has to have a goal. What should be my goal? Thanks for the question, Beth. You have some very lucky grandchildren. My own mother wrote a 4-page history of her life growing up, and I treasure that document, only wishing she'd written more. Let me give you some advice on how to approach the interesting task of writing down a family history. Keep the genealogy separate. It's valuable work and it's interesting to genealogists, but not so fascinating to anyone else. I can tell you that my husband likes genealogy quite a bit, but he hasn't been able to engage me. Despite trying all sorts of tricks to catch my interest, like finding previously unseen photos of my great-grandparents, he hasn't been able to capture my imagination with it. What your family is going to be interested in is the stories. Human beings are hardwired to appreciate stories, and that's the unique gift you have to give your grandchildren. For example, I remember my mother telling me an unforgettable story about her mother, whom I never met because she died before I was born. My grandmother was a talented musician who played both piano and violin, and amazingly for those days, the early 1900s, she was also a conductor. She had been born in Joggins, Nova Scotia, but she went to university at Mount St. Allison in Sackville, New Brunswick. While she was attending university, her mother, my great-grandmother, was dying of cancer. So my grandmother rode a horse and carriage home every weekend, and that carriage was on a sled in the winter. In 2005, in the months following my mother's death, my family and I made that trip from Joggins to Sackville by modern car, and it took us 40 minutes. We were astonished that my grandmother had been able to do it every weekend on a sled. It gave us something to think about, and it really made me feel connected to my own family history. That's the kind of story that your children and your grandchildren will find interesting. I've included several links below to blog posts I've written on the value of stories. Check them out and then mine your own life for stories that your family will find interesting. Storytelling is the oldest of all the arts. Before the printed word, people had to remember stories. Good stories don't just recount facts, they also capture emotions and feelings. That's what makes them interesting. When you do your first mind map, here's the question I suggest you write in the middle of the page. What are the stories I most want my grandchildren to know? As you explore this question, all sorts of incidents, memories, and stories should emerge. And as you work to round up this material for your grandchildren, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. Storytelling is how we make sense of the human experience. It forces us to identify a beginning, middle, and an end, and it links us with the generations that went before us. Finally, let me wrap up with a quote from English novelist Philip Pullman. After nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Thanks for your question, Beth. If you can focus on stories, you'll not only write something that your grandchildren will enjoy, but you'll have a lot of fun doing it too.